we have a really exciting fireside chat planned now. And after that fireside chat, there'll be a very special something that I've been planning for a while. So stay tuned. Please welcome Richard K. Williams to the stage with Brooke McKeever to talk a fireside chat on the role of photobiomodulation in the management and containment of infectious diseases. And if you're like me, take some notes.
So we're very honored to have this discussion and have one more chance to talk with you. What I'd like to do is start with a backstory, which relates to connections. Connections that are unexpected and the improbable journey that brought us here. And it started with me in high school doing a science fair project. And I needed help. I wanted to do something in semiconductors. And I didn't have the access to the papers or the know-how or anything. There was no internet at the time. So I saw an article about a professor at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And I called him up. And he said, come over. So I drove 3.5 hours over to Champaign-Urbana to meet him. And he helped me with my science project. That professor was named John Bardeen, who is the Nobel Prize winner who invented the transistor. So he's a man who changed the entire world, but he took time to help a high school student. And he said, why don't you come to school here? So I did, and I graduated from UIUC, and then I went to Silicon Valley. And I joined a startup. It wasn't a startup company, it was kind of a restarting of a company. And I turned down another small company at the time, was called Intel, which I said, no, I want to go do this other stuff. And this company I worked for, we ended up making power electronics. So I was able to design the airbag for Mercedes, which was the first airbag that prevented babies' necks from getting broken when the airbag deployed. And the first power supply for the very first notebook computer, the Apple Blackbird notebook. The power chips in the StarTAC telephone, if you ever remember the first flip chip thing. This is ancient history. But during those 18 years at that company, I also got interested in biotech. So I went to Berkeley 2 nights a week for a 2-hour BART trip up to Berkeley, and I learned about molecular biology with no idea why I'm doing that. Then, after 18 years, the company got sold, and I said, okay, well, I don't want to keep working for big companies, so I started my own company. And just at that time, this new thing called a smartphone had been invented. But it had all kinds of problems. At that time, phones used yellow backlights, and they had camera flashes that looked like the pictures looked like you just got out of prison. They're too bright. So we created LED technology to dim the backlight of the phone and to replace the xenon flashbulb with an LED and put safety features into that. And later, we took that to do the LED backlight for LG television and Vizio TV, HD TVs. All this was a new field called photonics, the control of light. But the problem is, when I started my company, I took money from investors. They call it OPM, other people's money. And when you have OPM, your company has only 2 fates. You must either sell or have a public offering to the stock market, which is, in essence, also selling. So in 2005, I did an IPO. We were listed on NASDAQ. I rang the bell, opened the stock market, did all the things, and every year for 7 years, 4 times a year, I had to go travel to Boston and New York to talk to all the Wall Street types. And in 2012, the company was bought. And during the time that I was there, I'm thinking, these people don't have any heart. They don't care about the lives we're changing. They're just making money. And they can spread a rumor and the stock goes up, they make money. They spread a bad rumor, the stock goes down, they make money. So as long as the stock price is moving, they're happy. And I'm thinking, do I really want, now that my company's bought, do I really want to go back to that? And I said, no. So one of my investors said, you know, there's this crazy guy for the last 10 years have been trying to use LEDs to treat people. And he's worked out all these protocols, but he can't manufacture the devices, and he can't get into the hospitals because he doesn't have the technical pedigree, and the FDA was being dominated by pharma industries who were trying to prevent any alternative to drugs from coming to the market. So I said, you know, that sounds like a good thing to do. So I took all the know-how that I had in all the photonics of the previous company, mixed it with all his ideas, and we created LightMD as a result. But the key point was, we took the money we made from the IPO, and we invested it in LightMD so that we would never be subject to other people's money taking over the company so the pharma companies could buy us out and shut us down. And people who are in the healthcare industry have to know that, you know, when you're starting to be successful, don't give in to that. So then the story jumps forward to I was in Hong Kong during the outbreak of SARS. And then I was in Dubai during the outbreak of MERS. I had nothing to do with either of these contagions. but we came up with a protocol and wrote a letter to the Prince of Saudi Arabia trying to get us to come use our device to treat MERS. We had prepared it all, and we didn't get a response. So you fast forward to the end of 2019, 2020. Suddenly, we start seeing an outbreak that looks like kind of MERS. It has a different characteristic, but it had a SARS-like characteristic. And so we sent out a letter immediately to all the doctors who owned our machines, because we don't do therapy. We only make the machines and teach doctors how to use them. They're the real heroes in the story, not us. And one of the doctors was being pushed, oh, you have to do intubation, you have to do mechanical ventilators, and all these extreme interventions only lowered the chance of survival for the patient. So one doctor in Texas said, you know, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take this machine and I'm going to start treating people. And people were dying left and right at that time by early 2020. So he actually took a van and he put the machine in the van, and the patients drove up in a car, and he handed the pads to them, and they sat in the car and did the treatments, and he sat in a van and ran the power for them, and he treated 50 patients. And of those 50 patients, all of them recovered within 3 days with no drugs. But difficult to get that story out, because at that time there was basically a blackout on all scientific information, and that was a bad lesson that the world learned. Was when you stop communicating, people stop learning. They're even afraid to voice their opinion. So that was an amazing result. Since then, he's treated 350 patients, 200 of which were long COVID. All of them have recovered, and none of them need to live on supplemental oxygen. So that was a real success story in showing how managing an infectious inflammatory disease can be done without relying on the pharmaceuticals or classical conventional medicine. It doesn't mean that it has to be done exclusively. But this way, you don't have to take drugs that destroy your liver or kidneys just to stay alive, because then you lower your quality of life. So that's my story of how the improbable way I got here and how we started inadvertently in the area of managing infectious disease. So Brooke has her own story.
Hello, everyone. So actually, that crazy inventor I knew towards the end of college when in Northern California, and I was studying to be a marine biologist and playing basketball as the only woman on the all-guys intramural team. And so that crazy inventor had a device that helped me with my ankle injuries and jammed fingers. And I knew about it because I was a broke college kid with very minimal insurance, and somebody suggested that I try this light device. And it was mostly for skin indications, but go ahead and just try for your ankle and let's see what it does. And it absolutely changed the course of my ankles and their health, and just I literally was in a cast boot every year of high school and portion of middle school. So it really changed that. So I was thinking about it. He's like, oh, you'd be really good at this. You're from Texas. You care about people. You're a scientist. I'm like, yeah, I'm a marine biologist. Totally different. And then circle of life happened, and in 2007, I was in a car accident. I was rear-ended at 50 miles an hour, and that literally changed the course of my entire life because I could only stand comfortably for 5 minutes at a time. I was told for a year and a half just to take lots of medication, go to chiropractic, do as much as I possibly could, decompression, massage, all the typical Western medicine modalities, and nothing was working. I mean, complete pain, no use of my right arm, and I was 24 at the time, I believe. And they said, 3 spine surgeons said, you absolutely have to do the surgery. There's no way around it. And me knowing a little bit, I used to watch my ex-stepfather in surgery, and I just said, that's not going to work for me. I do not want neck surgery and a lifetime of pain and additional surgeries. So I said no, and I called the crazy inventor, Dan, and I said, hey, by any chance would that machine that worked on my ankle, would that work for my neck? He's like, what took so long? And literally drove me a machine. I started making payments, and within 1 month only, 1 month, I was able to wean myself off of all medication. I was able to wear my hair in a ponytail because even that is too heavy when you have a neck injury. Carry a purse, wear heels. In 6 months, I was running again. It's like I didn't ever look back on that injury until 10 years later. But what that did in healing myself set the course for, now this is going to be my mission. If I was told this in my young 20s, that I had to get surgery, and that was the only absolute option unless I wanted to be in pain and not feel my right arm, which I'm dominant on my right side, is that this is your only option is surgery. And I was there to disprove that. And so whoever was in the same predicament as myself, whatever age, I wanted to give them another option. And fast forward to 5 years later is when Dan and myself, and we started meeting up with Richard. And Richard, I think we met at CES the first time, and just understanding and his history and where he came from. And when the companies did pair up, that's when really the technology took off. Richard had the capability and his engineering team to design and manufacture a really top-notch machine and take the concept from what Dan had into a machine that we could materialize into an effective solution for hospitals and doctors and patients alike. And so I continued doing light and trying to, nobody believed in it at that time. It was me looking like an alien, giving away this red light blinking. What are you doing with this huge backpack on my back? And all that turned into just groundwork and just putting it out there and all over. New York and Texas and California, and really learning the machine and about myself. And fast forward, for infectious diseases, I had a few cases. I had some mono cases. I had some pneumonia, bronchitis, some flu, and it was consistently working, but it was frequency-based that it was working. So there are some rife frequencies that are anti-pathogenic in our device that are used in combination with other frequencies that literally make it impossible for those infections to survive. And that is a different mechanism than the blue light. And so seeing those kind of results in our office, even a case of tuberculosis. It was a teacher who She was told she just had a consistent cough, and she ended up having tuberculosis for an entire year before it was diagnosed. And she came to us with very, very labored breathing. Well, that woman now owns a machine, and her daughter has another machine in which she started a business up in Northern California because of her experience with us. She's able to breathe and work and live a comfortable life. And so it's really interesting to me on how all of these different people from different walks of life, and whatever the disease or injury or illness is, on how light can have an effect, and dramatic effect on the quality of life, but also on eliminating some diseases that medication either worked part way or didn't, but that light was a solution to get them to where they needed. And then fast forward, we'll go to COVID. Or my
Actually, I
COVID
already
experience?
talked about it, but
Okay.
I'll give one more infectious disease. One more infectious disease example. Our partner Dan was working with a doctor in LA who was Dr. Halsey, actually the daughter of the admiral, and she had been treating patients who had had some respiratory illness. And they treated the patient, and then he left, and he started to feel ill, and so did she. So they had contracted something from the patient. So she immediately started using her machine to treat herself. Dan was partying with his college friend, and they went to a baseball game and hung out that whole week. And by the end of the week, he was so sick, he couldn't take it anymore. So he went home, and he just started treating himself to the machine. The friend that he went to the baseball game with did not have a light machine. After 1 week of what Dan claims was the worst week of his life, fever and nausea, then they tested and he found he had H1N1, bird flu. And he recovered fully. He called up Dr. Halsey. She had no symptoms because she took the treatment immediately. He called up his friend. His friend was in the hospital for 1 month. He had liver failure. He contracted diabetes and almost died. So the issue there is when you're dealing with an infectious disease, timing is everything. And that leads us to the long COVID. If you treat it early, it's just an inflammatory symptom. You get rid of the inflammation, you recover. But if you wait, now it becomes a metabolic issue, it becomes a neurological issue. Now you're going to have to deal with multi-symptoms.
So we have a few cases of long COVID that I wanted to share some examples. And one was a young man, professional surfer, who was in Bali and contracted COVID in 2019. He came to us in 2023 with brain fog. His coloring was off. He was just completely out of it. And he had been living like that. But when he contracted COVID in Bali, he actually went to the hospital and was given some medication, which made him go into liver failure. So now he was fighting for his life, for his liver, but also from the COVID. So when he came back to the States, and years later is when we actually were able to treat him. It took 2 weeks. 2 weeks for him to have a full recovery from his long COVID. From the liver damage, his coloring completely changed. His mother, who came to the sessions with us, says, I have my son back. He's with it, he's alert. You can see the coloring in his eyes, you can see the coloring in his skin. He's just completely recovered. And so seeing that was pretty amazing to see in such a straight turnaround on how light can have a tremendous effect on the body. But there was another more impactful case that came from a colleague of mine who's a nurse, and she actually started a business. We trained her on the device. Her sister had a life-changing experience, and so both of them ended up purchasing machines. And Monica is a nurse, so she has Synergy Light Therapy in Montebello. It's in East LA in California. So her client actually came to her. She was on the lung transplant list. She was post-COVID. She's a long hauler for a year and a half. 4 months in the hospital, intubated, ventilator, trach, ECMO, then two rehab centers to learn how to walk and to learn how to exercise her lungs. So she went to visit her daughter in California before she went to hopefully get a lung transplant. And so she promised her daughter that she would do 1 session. Well, that 1 session turned into 6 one-hour sessions. And in that time, this woman went from fibroids in her lungs, lung heart scars, scar tissue thickening in and around the lungs, a consistent heart rate of 125 beats per minute to 180 beats per minute. Her OSAT stayed only maximum at 93, going all the way down to an 89. Shortness of breath, fatigue. She carried a portable oxygen unit with her. She was only able to sleep 2 hours at a time. So all this was going on, which she also lost her husband during COVID. They were both intubated. So she woke up and he was gone. So lots of trauma associated. After only one session, her blood pressure went from a 148/98 down to 138/86. Her heart rate went from 125 BPM down to 115. Her oxygen went from 90 to 93% up to 98%. That was in one session. She was only able to take a 3-second count of a deep breath, consistently coughing, wheezing. Before her second session, she reported she got a full night's sleep. So after only sleeping 2 hours a night because she would wake up short of breath, not being able to breathe, she was able to get 6 hours straight. So she did a second treatment. Her blood pressure went from a 134/88 to 132/82. Her heart rate went from a 102 to 92. Her oxygen went from 98% to 99. She then was able to breathe 7 seconds for deep breath, and her wheezing was lessened. Before the third session, she actually slept the whole night. She went to Disneyland with her daughter and walked the entire day for 5 hours without stopping. This is somebody that wasn't able to do chores without shortness of breath. The next day, she actually went to the Hollywood Walk of Fame because she didn't get enough of the Southern California tourism, and she was able to literally do it. So she's pushing herself. So then she starts with a heart rate of 92 and 84 BPM. She finishes with, went from a 92 to an 84 after that session. She was no longer wheezing. On the fourth session, she went from an 88 heart rate down to an 80. And her blood pressure, 134/82, down to 130/80. She ended up doing 6 sessions total in that week. And overall, her oxygen improved from a 90 to a 99%. Her blood pressure went from, her heart rate went from 125 to 75 beats per minute. She also had lung CT scans showing less scar tissue, less fibroids, a fibroid on her left lower lung that was 1.1 centimeters down to 0.05. Her pulmonary nodules reduced in size or are gone, and her diagnosis of moderate to severe chronic interstitial lung disease went down to a mild case. This is 1 month after her 6 sessions of light. Her doctor took her off the lung transplant list. She is no longer carrying around supplemental oxygen. She is sleeping every night. It's cases like this with 6 one-hour sessions that you've completely transformed somebody's life just by the power of light. And so things like that just really stick out with you and are impactful because this woman not only got to enjoy the week with her daughter before what she thought was going to be a long trip with the lung transplant and more surgeries and more struggling, to now being able to enjoy her life.
So we can't spread this message by ourselves. And we've found the medical industry very vertically siloed. Every specialty only talks to other people in that field. People in the same hospital don't even know each other. So this kind of group, you're the ones who will spread the word and change the world, not us. We're only the enabler. You're the actual messengers. But last topic we'd like to just bring up is, we survived COVID. What about the next pandemic? What can we do differently to change the trajectory of the disease and get a containment without letting the pharmaceutical companies tell us they know what to do when they in reality do not know what to do? So what's your idea?
The best thing for people to do is to own their own machines, to have this tool if a pandemic comes up again, to be able to have access. If you can't do that, to be able to have a small clinic or a local place that you can go that provides this light therapy. I think we're a ways out of the U.S. hospital system in adopting this technology, but I'm still hopeful. So if not that, then doing non-contact therapy for infectious diseases is a way to keep the contagion from spreading while still helping people to heal themselves.
And in Taiwan, we're now like in 14 hospitals. We're not in 14 hospitals in America. So America has tremendous resistance to new technology in deploying any alternative, especially biophysics related. But the other thing is, if you go back to the events of January of 2020, by the time the government figured out what was going on, it was already a world pandemic. It would spread so far. So hopefully, through our connections, through artificial intelligence, through more transparent data, we can start to have AI analyze the data and start to make suggestions of what are the likely candidates that are the contagions, and we can use methods that invoke the innate immune system, not the adaptive immune system, which has an ability to react to something that it's never seen before, because the adaptive immune system cannot. And we know that a vaccine that comes in only 6 months has a lot of risks associated with it. So if we can find ways to use our innate immune system, we can contain a contagion before it becomes uncontainable and has all the psychological, physiological, and economic effects that we've learned. A pandemic is not simply a medical condition. It's actually an entire societal event. So we're hoping that this technology can be one means, and we will, of course, be working on lower cost versions to be able to deploy that for wider spread personal use. But at the same time, it involves a change in the hospitals and the FDA itself. So that takes culture change, and that takes time. Okay, that's about all we have to talk about. So any questions?
We have some devices that have been hand carried there, but not yet because it's not approved.
One of the things about Europe is they have a different approval system called CE Med, and it costs essentially the same as the FDA approval. So it like doubles the approval costs. So if America and Europe could agree on one set of standards, it would greatly help the world. But Europe can't even agree with England, so. Yeah.
Side effects.
Side effects, basically only dehydration. You have to hydrate because you will definitely feel it. That's why, in general, the light beds are not as good, because if you're treating all the body, you're treating parts that are not sick, but that's still causing an increased dehydration level. So you really want to concentrate it on the portions of the body that are sick if you can. And this is not for general health or musculoskeletal thing. I'm talking about visceral organs being affected by infectious disease.
Do you have any waterproof ones?
Water, which one?
Waterproof ones?
Oh, we could do it. We've not tried to make one, but it's entirely, the technology is entirely possible. Yeah, we would have to seal the pad with a plastic layer, a silicone layer as part of the molding process, where you would lay down and then we call it an overmold, but it's entirely doable. We did have this machine fall off the back of a motorbike, and also get a horse went crazy and went running and dragging the machine behind it. So it has survived some tough situations.
Is there a list of areas that it treats and that it doesn't treat?
Anywhere if you're human, it treats you. If you're living, so animals, plants, humans, if you're biologically alive, it works for you.
Yeah. It's basically, mitochondria are everywhere, from simple creatures all the way up to whales and mammals included. And
I mean, we have stories of fish to camels to dogs and cats, ducks, hamsters.
We don't think the fish market is a very big market, though.
Oh, it's amazing for autoimmune. And the reason is in the name, photobiomodulation. It modulates the system. So whether the immune system is overactive or underactive, it's actually the same exact protocol that you use, and the body adjusts to what it needs. And that way, it's the same for hypo and hyperthyroidism. So it's really about the location and the place on the body that we place it, rather than the treatment that we do, because it's going to be the same.
And everything we know, we share to everybody. So whatever we know, you know, if we get a new discovery, or a doctor in Africa or in India makes a discovery, we share it with everybody. Because that's the way medicine should be. It should be a common database, not this company owns that and that company owns this and this is my IP.
I'm just curious. So you were saying that these sessions are an hour. Is that how long treatment usually is, or what's the average time?
So there's treatments which are tissue specific at 20 minutes, and then we string a series of them together to call a session, because in hospitals we've found you can't do the treatments, because if you're doing a sequence of 3 treatments and the nurse staff changes or the doctors change, it gets lost in the mix. So now we just have this one-touch session for medical, for chiropractic, for sports, which was used. We were used by the China swim team when they won the gold medal. And then also for skincare. Skincare is much less time, because you don't want to put too much energy into the upper layers of the skin to get the highest efficacy. But the internal medicine of the MedPro is all 1 hour, 60 joules going into the body per square centimeter. So it's a lot of energy. That's why you need water.
Yeah, usually we do 20-minute sessions for quick fix,
Yeah.
you know, or a headache or migraine, something like that. Doesn't need too much energy.
The problem is somebody comes with one issue, and then when you're treating them, it's, oh, but I really have this knee problem. Oh, but you know, I got this mold growing on my ankle, and okay. Then the next thing you know, they've been there for 2 hours, and it's like, okay, I really got to go to dinner now. So.
And they really don't want to hear the beep. When the beep of the machine means the treatment is done, usually people are like, oh. It's a good sign.
Okay, well, one last question, or? That means we answered all the questions. Wow. Oh, no.
Yes.
Well, again, because the organs you need to target shouldn't be all of them at once, then you would be making a device where parts of it would be off. People did it, or people built vests to hold it, but it turns out that it wasn't very well received. So placing it and where you... Fix what's broken, don't fix what's working fine. Okay,
Actually,
thank you.
There's systemic benefits. So when you're working on a specific location, it's going to help the whole body.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.